Hello, I'm John McNamara. I'm the Information Architect for IBM Messaging, and I'm here today with two gurus from MQ Lite, Melanie and Mike. Melanie and Mike, do you want to introduce yourself and say who you are and what you do at IBM?
Hiya, so I joined IBM about a year ago, and I've been on the MQ Lite service for Bluemix team ever since.
Mike, yourself?
Hi, I've joined IBM about 8 years ago, worked on MQ, and now I'm working on MQ Lite.
Fantastic, buddy. So today we're going to talk about MQ Lite and something specifically called Worker Offload. We've got a couple of samples to show you as well, but I guess the first question should be, what is Worker Offload and why is it important? Melanie, can you talk us through that?
Lite is a service which is in Bluemix, and so it's a cloud-based messaging service that provides flexible and easy-to-use messaging for any Bluemix applications. So one of the reasons why people would want to use MQ Lite would be to do Worker Offload. And so Worker Offload is basically a very common use case for messaging where if you have an app, a web-based app, for example, and it has to do any sort of processing, you don't want the processing to be done by the same app which manages the front end which is being shown to anyone. So you'd want to decouple that into a front-end app and a back-end app which communicate together, and that communication can be done asynchronously using a service like MQ Lite.
Fantastic. So we've got a couple of samples to show you today and to run through and to give you an example of how easy it is to use MQ Lite. Can we talk about what those samples do?
Sure. So there are two samples which one is a node.js sample and one is a Liberty for Java sample, and they basically show how to write a simple app and get started to use MQ Lite, which has two APIs. So people can either use the MQ Lite API using Node.js or the JMS API using Liberty for Java. And so these samples show Worker Offload, which we just described, and can be used to get started with the service and to get started with your own apps to do whatever you want with the service.
That sounds awesome. So, Mike, I guess you're the man with the keyboard. Can you walk us through these samples and show everyone how easy it is to get started?
Indeed, I do have the power and the buttons. Right, so what we do is, hopefully you can see that. On the right-hand side of the excuse me, on the right-hand side of the screen, you see tutorials and samples. Take the first one. That link, you click that link, it takes you to this article, and this article is getting started with Node.js apps. And on the first line here, where the sample's available here, so you click that, and that opens up a JAWS repository from where you can download the zip. The same applies for the other sample we've got to show you. The same, it's the Liberty for Java apps. Click there, and again, that opens up a new window from where you can download the Java sample.zip. So, let me share this screen with you a minute. I've already got my Bluemix account. I've installed the Cloud Foundry command line interface. I've got my Bluemix account. I've logged in, and I've already downloaded the sample. You can see both samples here in this window. So now I've already unzipped them as well. So that's the key thing to do. You download them, unzip them, and then you log in using CF login, which I've already done. Excuse me. And now we'll create the service. So we go CF using the CF command line tool command to do just that. So MQ Lite standard MQ Lite sample service. Now I need to.
Yeah, just wanted to mention, so this is the service, the instance of the MQLite service, which is going to be used by the samples
Yes, so
to communicate.
So let's go into the MQLite tab, and we'll go into the node sample directory. And what we see there, we see all the good stuff.
So you can see there are two apps. So you can see MQLite sample backend node and frontend node. So those are two separate apps in different directories. And inside those directories, it's just standard node.js code and two app.js files. And so now the CF push command is a Cloud Foundry command line interface command, which is going to upload the samples onto Bluemix. And in general, there is a bunch of command line arguments we supply, but instead we're using quite a useful little file called the manifest.yml file. If you can open it up, Mike.
Yep, sure, will do. Screen share, and I'm looking for manifest.yml. There you have it.
So there you go. That's a file that is packaged into the zip, and it basically tells the CF push command what to do when we invoke it. So it knows to deploy two applications. The first application is the backend one, and we specify things like the memory it should use, the amount of disk, where the actual app file is using the node.app.js command at line 5. And for the backend, you can see we use a no root at line 9, which basically says that this is a worker application. It doesn't have a root, which is actually a URL associated with it because it's just a backend. Whereas for the second app, as you can see on line 17, it has a host, which is going to be the URL from which we can access the front-end app, and which uses another Cloud Foundry command, which is random word, which generates a completely random URL so that you don't clash with anyone else on the internet, basically. And the other important thing, both of these apps will be bound to our instance of the MQLite sample service, as specified in the last two lines.
Start screen share, and there you go.
Great. So if you scroll up a bit, what you can see is it going through the different stages of uploading our files, but also so uploading our files, binding the service, starting our app. And what you can notice is that when it's starting the app, it's pulling in, Bluemix is pulling in all your dependencies for you. So you can have a look and you can see npm log and express and various node packages which are going to be used by the app and which are specified in a package.json inside of the folders containing the apps. And so it gathers the dependencies for you, which is one of the great advantages of Bluemix. And if you were to develop locally using a local MQLite install, you would have had to download the dependencies yourself, which you can still do if you want to develop use it on your local machine. But then when you push, you obviously don't want to upload your own dependencies. You want Bluemix to sort that out for you. And so we have a .cf ignore files packaged in there, which specifies not to upload the node modules directory in which the dependencies are, which is quite useful as the upload is much quicker and you don't need to worry about dependencies.
Okay, I'll just show you the output from that a minute. I've taken the URL you see after the URLs line there. I've copied that into a browser, and I'll show you what that looks like quickly a minute. Screen share, and it's that one. So you should be able to see that now. And I click submit work. And there it goes.
Oh.
So as you can see, it's quite easy to deploy. And now that the front end and back end are up and running, they're both connected to our service. And when you click submit work, basically the front end puts these messages it uses the service to send the messages to the back end, which sees that their messages are available. And so here, instead of doing anything complex like video processing or something like that, we're just uppercasing the words we receive in the backend. So the backend worker or workers, and since you can scale them out, process these and send the messages back. And so as you could see, the messages came in a random order whenever they finish processing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's brilliant. I'm going to fire up the other one now.
And so the Java for Java sample is pretty much the same as the Node one, but using the JMS API, and it's going to connect to the same service. So you'll see that both the Node and the Liberty for Java backend are communicating with the front-end app. And so you can very easily have one end written in Node.js and the other in Liberty for Java, for example, and they can both communicate without any hassle, really. And
Looks
so
awesome.
for a bit more of a description of the Liberty for Java sample, so we have a front end which is WAR and just a basic backend which is a near file, which are both being pushed onto Bluemix and using the same procedure as before, CF push, using a slightly different manifest with different app names, for example. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same. And this time, it's going to pull in the Liberty runtime, which is used by this set of apps rather than the Node.js runtime. This is automatically recognized by Bluemix.
What sort of applications would you see this being used for? So, if a developer were to pick this up, what sort of things could they do with it?
So, I guess if you want to get started with Bluemix and MQLite on Bluemix, the easiest way is to just grab hold of these samples and go through the articles, which basically have the instructions we're going through now, but also describe the source code and go through the most important steps. From where Mike got the zips, we also provide the source code. Especially so for the Node one, the source code is the same as what's in the zip. But for the Liberty for Java, we have the source code itself and also use some Ant build files to build them up for you. So if you want to try and use the service, the best way is to just grab a hold of them and go through them, and then you will see how to get started, really.
I just wanted to, hopefully you can see the screen I'm just showing with you now. This shows the MQLite sample service. This was a blank canvas. There was no apps or no services prior to deploying these samples. So now you can see we've got an MQ sample service there, and here are the apps running on that service.
Bluemix provides a very useful web page where you can see all your apps, all your services, and everything live as we're pushing them from Mike's laptop.
That's fantastic.
So now, if we switch back to the actual sample, let me just show you that again. What we should see now. Right.
So if you go back onto the UI.
Oh, there we go. It's showing it now.
Yeah, there you go. So as you can see, we see both Liberty for Java and the Node.js backend sending responses whenever we hit submit work. Both apps are dealing with the input they're receiving, and it was as easy as doing about 4 or 5 commands.
There you go. I won't press that button anymore.
Mike, that is phenomenal. So users and developers can just pop onto the community and download the samples right from the community and then use the instructions in the blog to follow to get their samples up and running, and then once they're up and running, they can modify them however they choose to.
Exactly. Just go onto our docs page on the Bluemix webpage, and you're all set to go.
That is sweet. Okay, so guys, thank you very, very much. That's really useful, really instructive. I'll put links in the notes to the community and to the samples. Guys, thank you very much indeed. Take care, and thank you so much for joining in.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.